This episode of Truth Table is brought to you by Baker Books, a division of Baker Publishing Group, which seeks to build up the body of Christ through books that are relevant, intelligent, and engaging. Visit bakerbooks.com. And The Witness, a Black Christian collective. Sisters, how y'all feel? Brothers, y'all all right? If this is your first time at Truth Table, welcome to the table. And if you've been sitting at the table with us all these years, we are so grateful that you have been listening to us through these years, and we are inviting you to partner with us and support our work at patreon.com/truthstable. Now pull up a chair and have a seat at the table with us. Hey y'all, welcome to Truth Table, Midwives of Culture for Grace and Truth. I'm Ekemini.
And I'm Christina.
This table is built by Black women and for Black women. So welcome to the table, C. How you doing, girl?
I am doing decent. I'm doing okay. How are you doing today?
Good.
Yes.
Feeling good. Feeling great.
For the people who are viewing, you are wearing your polka dots.
I am.
I have on my blue earrings.
And my floral. You know, I love a mixed print.
Yes.
You know, I like to mix
it up. Mix it up.
It's my signature.
Mix it up.
I do.
Today I'm all about the solids.
Yes. And I love that blue skirt.
Thank you. I always try to bring back a traditional element. I'm a woman of the 1930s, minus the oppression. Minus, not being able to voteness of it all. But
right, that whole thing, that little thing,
the Jim Crow-ness of it.
Yeah,
yes.
It's giving all that.
But I do like a good tailored skirt.
Absolutely, and it's lovely. It is
Thank you.
So y'all know we are still in our Black Brother We Love Ya series.
We are, because we sincerely do.
We do. The topic on the table today.
Come on now.
Black Brother, we love you. But the podcast got to stop. It's getting out of control.
Come on.
Getting radioactive.
So one of the things, I don't know if people know this about us, but maybe people who actually listen to the things that we say, I'm always tickled when people actually quote us back. And I'm like, I probably should watch what I say because
I'm like, I said that. Oh, okay.
But if you have listened, you have heard us probably joke about our relationship with podcasts in general, that we are non-listening podcasters. Like we don't listen to podcasts. Now, my husband is a bona fide podcast listener. I mean, I think he listens to podcasts almost every day, maybe not Sundays, but almost every day he does. And he'll send me, he has sent us, y'all need to listen to this,
Yes.
In terms of podcasts. But I am not, that's not my jam. Like, I'm not a person that's like, let me listen to this podcast. And what about you?
Let me listen to this song.
Yes.
Let me listen to a sermon. I'm all that before I go to like a podcast. Now I do listen to Get in the Word with Truth Table daily.
Yeah.
But I listen, and I actually
to get in the Word.
I actually listen as a listener.
Indeed.
Whereas when I listen to Truth Table, I'm listening to hear, okay, did we hit this point? Maybe we could. I'm listening differently. I'm listening as a producer.
In an editorial way.
Yeah, I'm listening as an editor or a producer when I'm listening to Truth Table.
For sure.
And we're OGs in the podcasting game. So the irony, and I think it might be a generational thing. I don't know why we're not big on. I'm a big music person, though, so any chance I can listen to music, I'm going to listen to music.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been in it since 2017. Before it really, took off, and so we've been doing this for we're in our 7th season now. But we have noticed some shifts, even though we're not, hardcore podcast listeners.
From what people have said to us and have noted in our hearing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see it on our timelines.
For sure.
So because of the advent of the video podcasting, we see clips that come up on our Instagram or Twitter,
go viral.
And that go viral, on Facebook, and it has been, some have been very disturbing content to watch. Sometimes the way that Black male podcasters deride and speak derogatory and downright misogynistic, toward Black women. But I guess before we go all the way into that, and will.
And
What?
And will and do.
What do you think are the positives?
Oh, there are tons of positives.
Yeah.
So, one, I just think that there are so many groups who we need to hear more of their voice.
Absolutely.
So, I am down for as many as many indigenous women who want to get together and have podcasts, video casts that they want. Y'all just go on and talk the talk, because there are
Yeah.
some voices that are really deeply silenced and muted out
Hmm.
and suppressed in our culture. And so, yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
I don't have a beef with that. Talk your talk.
Yeah.
So as it relates to Black men who are podcasters, I am grateful that there are these spaces and that we do need to hear black men speaking about Black malehood and their own identity instead of people pontificating about it on their behalf.
That's
And
right.
I think coming out of the world of psychology, I mean, I have long seen kind of a field that makes all kinds of statements and generalizations and uh, kind of pathologies about Black
Of
male
course.
identity. And so,
Yes.
to whatever extent Black men can speak for Black men, and not necessarily even the whole group, but their own story,
Their
their own
own. Yeah.
narrative,
Yeah.
amen.
Yes.
Like that is great. And I think it's a place for all of us to hear and understand, even
Hmm.
even if we feel like we have a handle on another group, like no,
No.
they represent their group.
They know their experience. They're the expert on their own experience.
Yeah, they're asking their own experience. And I think we have to respect people telling their own story as they see fit. And so I appreciate that. And I also just recognizing some of the social science work around, I mean, this issue of loneliness, the way that it is coming up in the social science research, particularly around men and loneliness.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that it's just important whenever there are spaces where there are men, Black men specifically, as we're talking about, who are in conversation with each other, who are sharpening each other, edifying each other, challenging each other. Yeah, presenting their own story back and forth, and even in their own spaces. I'm not anti-affinity group. I do think there are
Mm-mm.
there are need for different groups of people to come together with folks that they have shared significant
That's why
identities
Truth
with,
Table exists. Part.
unapologetically so.
Uh-huh.
Unapologetically so. And so yeah, I think that's important. I think we're all better when we hear and we listen in and we learn from Black men in this example that we're talking about. What are some of the strengths that you see?
Well, yeah, I do think I guess, the blessing and the curse, of the podcast, industry is that, there's autonomy.
Mhm.
You don't really have nobody checking you, and so you can
Mhm.
get a mic, easily, and
Yeah.
you can, talk about,
Yeah, there's no fact checking, that's for sure.
yeah, you can work out your viewpoints, your politics, your all types of things, your religious views,
Yeah.
your economic,
Mhm.
positions, all types of uh, uh, things that you can work out, within
Mhm.
the podcast industry. So it does, it has democratized thought leadership
It has.
for the good and the bad, and
Mhm.
so and I think if everybody has free access to doing that, then there's no reason why Black men shouldn't either, right?
Absolutely.
um but I also do think that and I do empathize with Black men because I don't think that there are enough spaces that are strictly for Black men,
Mhm.
to talk about
Mhm.
Black malehood
Mhm.
and manhood and what that looks like, or talk about to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
about their challenges, their struggles, the loneliness,
Mhm.
epidemic
If
that
people
maps
would
onto
even
them,
describe it that
if
way.
they
But
would
yeah.
even describe
Mhm.
it that way, right?
Mhm.
Maybe even mental health issues. There's not
Mhm.
those spaces are not in abundance. They're in
Yeah.
the ways that they are for Black women
Mhm.
now.
Right.
Now, Black women have taken the initiative to create those spaces for
Mhm.
ourselves because nobody else was going to do it for
Yeah.
us. Nobody's going to invite us in to do it. So we had to build our own table. We've had to
Sure.
build our own spaces in order to do those things. But I do think that even in religious spaces, I think
Mhm.
particularly in church spaces, I don't know that they might not feel because of the demographics,
Mhm.
and we know that there's a whole systemic backdrop as to why
Mhm.
the church is mainly occupied about runs about 80 to 85%,
Mhm.
women, that
As congregants.
as
Mhm.
congregants, right?
Mhm.
And there's a whole host of reasons,
Mhm.
why, particularly within the Black church, systemically, why that's worked out. But I don't even think that in those spaces, in those church spaces, where it should be actually a place where Black men
Mhm.
can come together and
Mhm.
really, air out and be honest about what's going on in their lives.
Mhm.
I don't think that they even have the liberty, you
Mhm.
know, um, to do that in those spaces, and it ought not be like that. So I do empathize, actually, and to a degree, I think I understand to a degree why sometimes these podcasts come out the way that they do. With some of that ire, and that anger, because they're just unheard. I mean, even if you just think about, well, we have election season coming up. Lord help us.
Cheapers. Cheapers.
I'm like, I still ain't recovered from the last one.
Listen, I blame my fellow citizens next.
Exactly.
All 30 plus million of them.
We blame y'all.
Choices.
Listen, babe, choices have consequences.
Listen, for your neighbor and for
Generational
your
consequences.
grandkids, and carry on.
Anyway.
Trigger.
But yeah, I mean, for real, okay? Triggered. But yeah, we have an election coming up,
Right.
And so oftentimes these candidates and these campaigns, they are not geared, and the policies are not geared toward Black men. And so
that's
by and
for
large,
sure.
they are absolutely absent,
Sure.
from any significant like campaign and policy, proposals. And I think, and that's upsetting.
For sure.
That is upsetting. And so I think that in some ways Black men have been forgotten. So I do want to preface all of this by saying that, I see that, and I acknowledge that. And I think we have to acknowledge that if we're going to have a conversation about this,
Yeah.
because I think that animates a lot of what we hear,
Yeah.
from the Black male podcasts.
And I was going to say, when
And not all of them, but
yeah. Well, and we're mainly talking about the pieces that we have seen that are like, this is a problem. That's crazy.
The ones that are toxic, misogynistic,
Yes.
that are in the same spirit as, the late Kevin Samuels.
Yeah.
Those ones.
Yeah. It's an issue. But, I was going to say that even as we think about the necessity and the need for spaces where Black men can come together, even multi-generationally and through varied experiences, be vulnerable, to your point, and have conversations. We Black women have carved out those spaces, and I agree with you in the sense of like, yes, because they've had to, but I also would say that their womanhood is not questioned when they do that. And I do think that when Black men come together in vulnerability, notions of maleness and manhood are then put on the table and put on trial.
That's what I meant to bring up when I was talking about church spaces. So I'm glad.
Yeah, and they need all the humans. It is when Scripture says that it is not good for humans. Adam to be alone.
That's
like
right.
we are made to be interconnected and interdependent. And so, but yet when men seek that out with friendships that go beyond playing a sport together, and by the way, I'm not knocking that, because there can be real connection through sports and all the things, but we can caricature them when they seek to have vulnerable, thoughtful, deep conversation.
It's put on trial.
And all the many layers of what that triggers and means for people. And I just think we have to be honest about that. And it's not just men critiquing other men, although that happens in kind of the in-group bullying. But there are women, who caricature and critique men when they are seeking to demonstrate vulnerability, when they're seeking to dig deeper.
That's right.
That can even be ridiculed and questioned by women who have a particular idea of what they think manhood is supposed to be. Even amongst women who would consider themselves to be progressive and womanist and wanting to dismantle the toxic patriarchy, I still have observed a particular way in which these internalized patriarchy and expectations get mapped on in controlling ways around the Black male narrative.
No, you're absolutely right.
So it's like, let the brothers live.
Let them live. But your life cannot be tied to our death. That's the issue. And that's the issue. I mean, and that's actually not an exaggeration. I mean, just even last week, a friend sent a clip, of some Black male podcaster literally advocating for the killing of Black women. Like, what? Where is this where we are? And I think that's just
in the sense of saying like they're so damaged we should
Yeah.
start over again. It was very disturbing, and it's like, did you get your talking points from the Klan? Like, where did
It is
where
very
did you get your
disturbing.
talking
It's
points from?
very, very
Hmm.
disturbing, the ways that white supremacy has been internalized and
Hmm.
animated, and truly controlling,
Right.
you know, uh, much of that conversation.
Hmm.
But because the racial analysis is not there, for this segment of the Black podcasting world, I call it a segment, because it's not all Black male podcasters. Uh, they don't understand the ways that they are being used as puppets,
Right.
you know, um, and really doing the work,
Yeah.
of white supremacists.
Yeah.
Like with enemies, like with friends like this, who needs enemies?
I mean,
I mean,
it's very rare that we have the humility to recognize that how easily we all can be manipulated,
mhm,
right? And especially if we have long heard that we are, whether implicitly or explicitly, that we don't have anything to say and that people shouldn't listen to us, and all these caricatures, right? That I think it's hard for people to reckon with the fact that, hey, you are being a puppet right now for an
that's
agenda,
right.
and to hear that and to sit with it, you can see how people would end up feeling a deep sense of shame and
They feel a way about
frustration.
that. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
and,
Yeah,
and reject it altogether. But there's no doubt. I mean, the talking points come right out of racist tropes and into the sapphire stereotypes, mammy
Mammy,
stereotypes,
Jezebel,
Jezebel stereotypes. These are 100-plus-year-old
old controlling
marketing
images.
caricature
Hmm.
stereotypes of Black women, and then to hear Black men espouse them. Um, yeah, it's like, yeah,
It's hurtful. I
it
mean, it is.
oh, for
It just
sure.
is
On an
hurtful.
emotional level, it's hurtful, and also you can see the really weighty damage that
And
will be done.
yeah, and I think the reality is that with regard to like Truth Table, I mean, you yeah, your spaces, your affinity
Mhm.
spaces cannot be built
Right.
on the backs, of your counterparts. It just
Yeah.
cannot. It was not sustainable
Yeah.
for you. It's not good for your soul.
Yeah.
It ain't good for the soul of the women you're deriding. It is not good for the community as a whole. I
Yeah.
think in some ways we are really, you know, I think we're past the tipping point. I mean, it's really it's so self destructive
Mhm.
and radioactive, and that's something that True say we never did. I mean, I guess if we
At least we
wanted,
tried not to.
yeah. I mean, if I guess if we wanted to really build a platform and really
Oh, we and I
reach
yeah.
millions,
Well,
and
I was saying we would quadruple in terms of influence and size if we leaned into
yeah,
kind of misandrous. um
talking points about Black men. Why?
my goodness, how disturbing.
We actually do love Black men. Like,
Well,
why would we do
and
that?
so that on one level, on a sociological level, in a kinship level, but also on a spiritual level, we have to answer to God for how we talk about people and how we treat people. So it does really matter. I want to dig more into this kind of relational industrial complex after we
Yes.
have a short break. So we'll be right back, y'all.
Sisters, there isn't a conference like Joy and Justice. This year, the Joy and Justice Conference is back with its theme, Rise Up and Flourish. See, most conferences are heavily intellectual or heavily inspirational, but the Joy and Justice 23 conference is the perfect combination of both. It's a space for hope, refreshing, and a place to honor God as you were created to be. At the Rise Up and Flourish conference, we will tackle the injustices that try to hold Black people down and steal our joy. For 2 days, we will gather like family, the Witness, a Black Christian collective team, and their lineup of dynamic guests will speak to your core concerns. You will encounter dynamic worship, thoughtful presentations, and meaningful conversations that will empower you to experience the joy and justice you seek. The conference will include powerful talks from Danielle Koch, Jamar Tisby, Tyler Burns, Christina Edmondson, and yours truly. Life-giving worship will be led by Chantel Varnado, founder of Kingdom United Collective. We will also celebrate the upcoming release of the BCC's Vice President Ali Henny's new book, I Won't Shut Up, Finding Your Voice When the World Tries to Silence You. We want to see you at the Joy and Justice Conference Rise Up and Flourish 2023 on June 23rd through June 24th, 2023 in Chicago's south suburbs. The conference will be held at Lilydale First Baptist Church's Legacy Campus located at 424 Indianwood Boulevard, Park Forest, Illinois, 60466. Buy your ticket today at riseupandflourish.com. Regular price tickets are $125 and $200 at the door, but Truth's Table listeners will receive 25% off of your ticket price when you use the code Truth's Table at checkout. Don't forget, you'll get 25% off when you use the promo code Truth's Table at checkout when you purchase your conference ticket at riseupandflourish.com. Register today, and we will see you there. I Won't Shut Up, Finding Your Voice When the World Tries to Silence You by Ali Henny. I Won't Shut Up is a book about being Black in a society developed by white men to benefit white men, which means constantly pushing back against systems that were not constructed for your flourishing. You are made to feel that your life doesn't matter, your opinions aren't valid, and your entire existence is too loud. It can feel like the whole world is telling you to shut up. To these forces, Ali Henny is here to say, no, I am a loud Black woman and I won't shut up. Ali knows what it's like to navigate racism and racialized sexism. She's not taking it anymore, and she's calling you to join her in resisting racism by speaking the truth no matter the cost. If you're tired of feeling silenced, misunderstood, and abused by society, then make sure to pick up your copy of I Won't Shut Up, which releases on June 20th, 2023. And Truth's Table listeners can get 40% off plus free standard shipping when you use the promo code ALLYTRUTH, ALLYTRUTH at bakerbookhouse.com. Buy your copy of I Won't Shut Up at bakerbookhouse.com. Use the promo code ALLYTRUTH, ALLYTRUTH, to save 40% off of your purchase. This offer is only available from June 1st to July 15th. Make sure you get your copy today. And we're back here at the table talking about Black brother, we love you, but these podcasts gotta stop.
Well, the podcasts that are tripping for sure. I mean, the ones that, do your thing, but
the segment, the toxic.
Some of it's a problem.
Black male podcast. That's gotta stop. It's gotta stop. We gotta get down to the root of it.
Come on now.
So let's talk about the Black relationship industrial complex.
Yeah.
And it is complex.
Well, there's big money in insecurity and in suffering, especially if you don't have an answer to it. And so I just think the macro issues are huge as to why the dating layout is the way it is, why the marital rates are the way they are.
Mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, right?
Yep. Vietnam War and trauma.
Obviously police brutality, which is killing us. State sanctioned violence. I'm trying to think what else is.
Mistreatment of the poor and government's lack of resourcing.
Well, yeah, resourcing.
Of familial poverty dynamics.
The racial wealth gap.
Yep.
Right? So it's making it feel like as if, it's so many things. No reparatory justice.
Yeah, there is no justice unless it's reparatory, but carry on.
Until we have reparations. So the money is not quite where it ought to be, so people feel like they cannot get started, right? And they feel, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't get married. I don't have the money."
Well, and just about every group in the States, we see that when there is an economic downturn, we get an increase in divorce. This happened during the housing crisis, a decade or so ago. We saw an uptick in divorce rates across the country, but specifically as it related to white middle-class marriages, we saw an uptick in divorce. And that is because economics and the sense of financial stability is critical culturally to a whole host of American marriages. And so it is more likely for men to leave their families when they are unemployed or underemployed, especially if they are living out kind of a very real burden and caricature of a provider, right? And there are lots of ways to provide, and I am pro providing because we got to eat. People need to need to provide as best you can. We all need to be providing to our families. But I do think, we see the devastation of that when there is a social macro issue outside of our control, and the way that impairs and shapes marriages,
Mm-hmm.
makes them quite fragile.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It does. So
Mm-hmm.
so at least now we've named it.
Yeah, and there are other things too, and not to mention people's individual issues.
Yes,
micro issues are always on the table.
We all need therapy.
We have our individual stuff in the midst of dancing with the macro stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think if we don't name that, then we'll continue to be at each other's neck, which is the whole goal of the whole white supremacist order and ideology. And so in the Black relationship industrial complex,
this industry,
I think we find a whole host of people trying to work out a lot of their own, their own baggage and their own issues, which as human beings, that is what we do. But there are ways in which these things are being worked out in ways that are really detrimental, to the livelihood, the personhood, of each other too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't want to act as if we're focusing right on the segment of Black male podcasting that's toxic and misogynistic and radioactive. Yes. But within, on a broader conversation, the Black relationship industrial complex can be toxic, and that toxicity can be bidirectional, right? Because you got people that are kind of, self-certifying themselves as marriage counselors, as relationship gurus, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. And now I'm not the type of person that'd be like, cause you're single, you cannot have wisdom or insight or discernment into or advise a married person or I don't actually believe that, but I do believe that if you're single and you got a whole ministry that's centered around marriage and what it takes to sustain a marriage and build a marriage, you've never been married, that I think is a problem.
At least it's a question that you ought to be prepared to answer, right? So when I was first counseling many moons ago, I remember, so my training was marriage and family therapy. So that means, I would work with people and their kids. And it was not unreasonable for them to ask me a question about, do I have children? I was numerically younger than, and I looked young. And so, while I think I could have been defensive and been like, but I have my training. I mean, I did not have the experience of what it means to have a kid get up in the middle of the night over and over and over again, knocking on your door because of 101 different reasons. And so it doesn't mean that I can't foster empathy on that topic, but it was okay. They weren't trying to shame me by saying, do you have children? And even if I did have children now, and I do have kids, it doesn't mean I have children like their children. I mean, there's always nuances to this, but if somebody is bread and butter is on a particular topic that they themselves have not lived and are not living now, then they ought to, at least in humility, be prepared to answer the question.
That's right.
Like, you just can't just pish-posh it away. Like, you want to be able to answer the question. And even as we're having this conversation today, is when, we talked about how in doing a series about, Black brother, we love you. We recognize that we have thoughts, but we're not in that group. We are not Black men. Yeah. And so that has to be named out loud. It has to be named with humility and honor. And we have there are things that we can say, but we do have a limitation on authority when you are not a member of the group. And that is okay. Say it out loud.
That is all right. That is all right. But I just think that, I think you, come on now. I think that you have to be able to own where you are, and what your social location, it does matter. If you're going to be heading, I think there's a difference between, giving, one-off advice or counsel, hearing a friend and be like, well, have you tried this? Or maybe you're wrong here on this, as a single person speaking into somebody who's married, right? I think you can do that. You can speak because God has spoken. Yeah. But to have a whole, I think it's categorically different to have a whole ministry, a whole podcast, a whole thing, where you're counseling, married couples and whatnot, but you yourself have never, been married. I think it's something different if you have actually been married and, even if you're divorced, right?
And if you don't have necessarily even the training, I mean, like counselors, counselors train.
You need to have the training.
And they have to, and again, it doesn't mean that all counselors are the same, doesn't mean that all training is equal, but typically speaking, there's a governing body that provides some degree of accountability. I think
Mm-hmm.
ultimately that's the sticking point,
Mm-hmm.
is who are we accountable to as we give out our thoughts, our
Yeah.
advice, our recommendations. And so, I mean, that's a question for any and everybody. I mean, the reason why you go to a licensed or certified clinician or practitioner is one, because they're supposed to have the knowledge on the front end and have had the experience, but also if something goes awry, there is a licensing body in
Yes.
which to
You can
hold
hold
them
them
accountable.
accountable.
It's one of the issues
Yes.
we have in the church, because oftentimes in churches there are no licensing bodies in which to hold pastoral
Yes.
problems accountable
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When they err, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Or when they do harm.
Yep.
Yeah. Who do you go to?
There's no
Who
grievance
checks the
process.
pastor, right? So
Nothing.
yeah, what do you do? I think another aspect of the Black relationship industrial
Mhm.
complex is the predatorial nature of it.
Mm.
I think what I notice is that on Instagram you'll see like a lot of these memes. 10 ways to
Mhm.
know if the man is really in love with you.
Mhm.
5 ways to know if the woman is really down for you. And it's just like all of it, just these
But
very
it's appealing.
it, it is
Mhm.
because it deals with, because we're human beings, right?
Yeah.
And love is a core. First of all, it's a gift from God. It is a reflection
Mhm.
of the image of God,
Mm.
within us. Our ability to love and to
Right.
receive love,
That's
right,
right.
is an image, a direct reflection of the image of God within us, God's imprint,
Mhm.
on us, if you will. And so that is
Mhm.
a very, very deep core longing and desire for every human being. I feel
Yeah.
pretty good about saying that. I think I'm on
Yeah.
solid ground to say that, which is why
Mhm.
relationship,
Even if it looks
even
different for
on our
different people.
show,
Mhm.
our most popular and most requested, topics are relationships, singleness, marriage,
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
relation
And we move into that with some degree of hesitation.
all the time.
We do. Yeah. I mean, we could jam on that. We could be like, oh, let's just ride out the next 15 episodes talking about these dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah, we could, but we don't do that.
No.
And so we are influencers. We're like,
I
nah, I'm
know.
not talking about. Well, we
Although,
believe in
please,
boundaries.
yeah,
I believe in boundaries. Sorry, no, I'm not.
facts.
I'm not letting y'all into the inner core of my dating life. It's not
Yeah.
happening ever.
Listen,
I'm
well, yeah,
so-
and we don't have a right to access that of other
Yeah,
people
or Christina's
either.
married. We're not doing that. Yeah.
No.
This is not a reality show.
No,
And
yes.
so go watch Real Housewives.
Yeah, my
if you
kids
want
haven't
to.
signed on for that.
But yeah, the predatory nature, of that. And it's so legalistic,
Mhm.
so legal. These 5 ways, but we're so complicated
Mhm. Or
as human
5 things
beings.
you must do
Five things you must do.
in order
10
to get
things
a
you
man to
know.
take interest in you.
How
Mhm.
he's really in love with you. And I was just like, come on,
Yeah.
we are embodied souls.
Yeah.
We are complicated, beautifully complicated people, and so are they, it's so problematic. It
Yeah.
just is so problematic because when it comes to like dating and relationships, oh my goodness, it be complicated stories. Even when it's the right person for you and you're in the will of God, it gets ghetto. Remember when there was this funny, this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but there was this funny Facebook post I saw like 2 months ago and I cackled to no
Of
end.
course.
And I can't remember who wrote it, but it was like, following God or trusting God gets ghetto, but I'm going to stick beside him. Right?
I'm gonna stick
It
beside
do
him.
get ghetto. You be like, what is happening with my life right now? And I think that happens in relationships. It gets ghetto. I would imagine, I'm not married, but I imagine marriage gets ghetto sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, what's happening?
Yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't mean that God's not in it, right? Sometimes things are just not a straight shot all the time. And so
Yeah.
I think that this is why discernment, prayer, wisdom from the community is important.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that the relationship
Mhm.
people, they ain't trying to press that.
Yeah.
They're trying to tell you, I want them likes, I want them endorsements. So follow these 5 legalistic rules I made up, that I can't even follow, that I did not use to get my boo, by the way. And you gonna get your man, or you gonna get your Boaz, or you gonna get your girl. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's just really, it kills, because I see the hundreds of thousands of likes and I was like, oh my goodness. And it's dangerous.
Well, I think it also speaks to a longing, and this is a good thing, communally speaking, but again, it has to be checked. A longing for folk wisdom.
Okay.
So not,
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
yeah. So we have like, evidence-based practices. We have information that comes from empirical, peer-reviewed studies. But then
Mhm.
there's also just straight up folk wisdom. It's what your aunties tell you.
That's what,
It's what your
it
uncles
speaks
tell
to what
you.
we're
It's what,
missing, the
yeah. And
intergenerational
I do think
connection.
some of that I see out and about in the internet streets, I think some of it is this whole for folk wisdom.
Yeah.
It is the, the older cousin or the auntie or someone who
Grandma,
kind of
mom.
hips you to like, let me tell you how to get a date, or let me tell you how to XYZ, or whatever it
That's
might
right.
be. And I think there's a place for it when it's actually someone who's in your life. And I'm not knocking the people. I mean, I get
Yes.
why. I mean, I get why people put out that kind of stuff, like the 5 keys or the 7 keys or the 3 keys, like, all these numbers.
10.
Yes, because there's a market for it, and because I think they're trying to offer the folk wisdom and commercialize it.
Hmm.
My only concern is that if you present it in a way that is a guarantee, and it does
That's the
not work
thing.
out, knowing that there are a whole host of macro factors, then you leave people
And micro
feeling like
factors.
they did not have enough of whatever to make this come to pass. And then we get into blaming people.
Mhm.
And so I'm particularly sensitive, I think, to blaming, especially blaming Black women for the state of America's relational dynamics,
That's
the
right.
state of marriage, when there are these huge
Macro
macro
issues. Yeah.
factors. And then people end up, walking away feeling like, okay, there's something
I'm
wrong with
damaged.
me.
Mhm.
And it's a similar dynamic if you think about church traditions that are very much like, well, if you have enough faith, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's what I'm saying.
they'll take a text that talks about faith in the things that God has promised, not faith in whatever you want, but faith in what God has
It's
promised.
promised.
They'll take that text and say, well, you should be able to speak to that mountain,
They
and that mountain be
weaponize it.
moved.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Well, that mountain will be moved if it is in the will of God,
God
and
to
it's
move
tied
it.
to God's
To
promise.
move it. Right.
Right. I can't just say like I can speak $1 million to show up right here on
We're
this
not
table.
God. We don't
It's
create
just
reality.
no,
Our words do not create reality. They don't.
highly
Our words
controversial.
do have consequences, though, but
I
our words
know.
do actually
Yes,
not create reality.
there's
We are
only
not
one
God.
that spoke the cosmos into existence, and so I
I know
think
that's controversial. Save your letters.
yeah, I mean for
You're
sure.
not going to tell me that our words create reality. They
Well,
don't.
and here's the thing. Here's
Now we could begin to live into negative narratives of our lives. We do live within
Yeah.
the narratives that we speak to ourselves.
Sure, but the damage that gets done, and I think we all know this, that who people have been part of ministries that were told you didn't have enough faith, because if you had enough faith, they wouldn't have died, or you would be married by now, or this person wouldn't be
Wouldn't have gotten
be
sick.
sick, or whatever. And
Or you wouldn't be broke.
It's unbiblical and it's cruel.
It's cruel, yeah.
And I think the same dynamic can happen if you create this system based on folk wisdom or whatever you're remixing, and you hand it to people, and you're not acknowledging the macro conditions at play, and the fact that we just sometimes don't have control over all the things. And so that's where I think
Listen, we
the
don't.
relational industrial complex can get very unloving and unkind. And yet I still would say there is a need for folk wisdom.
Mhm.
But I just think we have to be incredibly responsible, which is why I don't just give out random advice.
No, yeah, because there's a thing as you need the care, of the community, right? There's wisdom in the
Mhm.
multitude of counselors, but that that there's an assumption behind that scripture
Right.
that we're not. This predates Instagram. This predates, the
Yeah.
social media, industry. This predates, this is a time where people are living communally among one another,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's important. I think it also speaks to a void that people have, a spiritual void, and that where the church should be, a place for these types of answers and this type
Yeah.
of dialogue to be taking place. That's oftentimes not the case for
Yeah.
them, or it's not. They don't feel, it's available, to them in the ways that they would like for it to be. Because when I think about folk wisdom and all that I do think about the church in my own relationship, to the church. And I know I came up in a different time, as a Christian, and I have a mentor, have had one, and I know that unfortunately is not something that's common
Yeah.
I think for a lot of
We
believers.
have to be discipled. I mean,
It should be.
I mean, it's a thing.
It's a thing. That's what we're supposed to make disciples, and we're supposed to be discipled. And
Disciple.
so
Yes.
it's unfortunate. It should not be a privilege,
I know.
but it is. Like these, that I know a lot of people that don't have, that are strong and solid in the Lord, but
I
for
know.
some reason never had, somebody to disciple them. But that's where you get that folk wisdom
Mhm.
from. That's I think the one that's most easily accessible. Say especially if
Mhm.
if you don't have a family,
Yeah.
the history or dynamic where you can tap into that. I think that's typically what it is. So I think it speaks also to that void,
Mhm.
of where the church ought to be,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
in this world, in this
Mhm.
whole
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah, and shout out to churches and ministries that are attempting to do that in ways that are not exploitive,
Yes.
that are not gimmicky, but are
Yes.
substantive
Hmm.
and kind, and thoughtful. Because there are some,
Oh, sure.
but I
Yeah.
think I think in fairness, there it requires a particular type of resource to pull that off with
Yes.
credibility. And
Yes.
so, but there is a need for it. And if the church doesn't figure it out in their own way,
Hmm.
then we end up with a dynamic where people are seeking out wherever they can find
Wherever they
answers.
can find
And
it.
that is why this is a huge industry. The whole
I
topic
think
of our whole entire topic. That's why it is where it is.
so. Then that gets us into because people are going to, if they need it, they're going to seek it out wherever they can, right? So they're
Hmm.
filling a void, to
Right.
some degree. But then I also think about therapy
Hmm.
and the inaccessibility of therapy
For
because
sure.
of how
Money.
expensive it is, how expensive it
Stigma, but I
is,
think money's actually
stigma.
even
But I
bigger
think
than
it's actually
stigma now.
exactly. I think it's the money more than the stigma now. Although I'm not saying stigma is not it's a non-factor. I'm not saying that, but money I think is
Hmm.
the huge barrier for most people now.
Hmm.
And so I think that people are looking, for counselors and therapists, the best way that they can get it,
Hmm.
And so I wonder, see if you could talk about, as a former trauma therapist that you
That's the reason why I'm
see.
former.
Oh, listen,
Carry on.
because the stories.
My
It's a
health
lot.
is my wealth.
Listen, trauma, it's no joke. It's no joke. Um, you know, what would you say is like animates a lot of the misogynoir, the toxicity
Oh,
that we experience? I mean, it's just the vitriol that we
right.
hear from this segment within the Black male podcasting world.
Yeah.
We're talking
Yeah.
about specifically the toxic and misogynistic ones,
Yes.
not all of them, but just this segment.
Yeah,
What
for
do you think is
sure.
animating that as your experience as a former trauma therapist?
Yeah. So what is animating the hostility,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So
Toward Black women,
yeah. So I mean,
from Black men.
hostility in general is typically a reflection of a fear.
Mhm.
Just across the board, whether we were talking about the vitriol that's coming our way that we're seeing in these
That's right.
clips, right? Um, but I think so. I think we have to be honest again about additional macro dynamics, right? So, what does it mean to be considered one of the only male groups that within your cultural context, um, you have been limited socially and economically and physically through bondage from protecting the women in your group?
And relationally, right? Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm, mhm,
these are just the facts
mhm.
of what it was and is.
Yeah.
And so people respond to that in different ways. Some people respond to that by vilifying victims that they cannot protect.
Mhm,
I
mm,
mean, that is a real thing
mm,
that people do.
mm,
Um, some people respond to it by kind of maybe a hypervigilant or a um, reactionary
mhm,
way of protecting.
mhm.
So we didn't talk about this on our recorded podcast that we did in the Facebook Black Women's Discipleship Group. We actually talked about the infamous slap. We talked and we chose to talk about it in that space and not on the larger podcast for a variety of reasons.
You mean the Will Smith
The Will
at the
Smith
Oscar and
and Chris
Chris
Rock.
Rock?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say that the way that people responded to that was an indication of their desire and longing for expressions of protection any way they could get it.
Mhm.
And also that maybe and this will be, I'm sure people will have feelings about this, but also the limitations in which we can imagine what
That you
protection
could look
looking
like.
look
Yeah.
like and defense and care can look like. but nevertheless, the longing for it, which is a good longing, but we have to have kind of a holy imagination for all the ways that this could look, you know?
Sure.
And so I just think we have to be honest about that these are some of the unique burdens that population experiences. I also think that we are going to have some serious conversations about family and child
Yes.
rearing
Yes.
and the shaping of Black men, the freedom and cultivation of Black boys. People often, there's kind of, I can't remember who coined it, but at this point, it's almost like, just colloquial within the Black community about women raising their daughters and loving their sons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an unfair critique that's often placed on Black mothers.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there is something to be said about some distinctions in socialization processes for Black men and Black women,
That's right.
which I then will necessarily be worked out in intimate partner relationship, like how we were raised as kids, our experiences with our parents absolutely work
Shapes.
themselves out in the relationships that we form and the ones that we avoid forming as we become adults. It's just kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have some serious family meetings about that.
So, like, well, yeah, family meetings in order. We call for them every season.
We do. At this point, every episode. Carry on.
We need a family meeting. Intervention. Truth Table is about interventions, y'all. So,
Truth Table is an intervention.
this is true.
Carry on.
We need a vacation. We're tired of intervening. Okay?
Turks and Caicos, send us. Thank you.
Please. So what would you say just on this tip, and then I want us to get into some like practical things that we can, help to kind of stop these, help these brothers course correct.
Yeah.
Because you can change. You can.
for
Nobody's
sure.
beyond redemption. So
For sure.
we will get to that. But I
Yeah.
also want to know, talking about family dynamics, the mother wounds, mothers and sons, that dynamic. There's oftentimes, not always, but I've seen in these dating streets, but I've seen like when there's a wound, when there's a mama wound,
Yeah.
this thing can it does start to begin to impact relationships,
for
or the
sure.
forming or the misforming or non-forming of relationships.
Yeah.
All the things. What are some of those? What does that look like sometimes? Some what are maybe some typical, let me say, mother and son wounds that kind of maybe show up maybe within our community when people have,
Yeah.
those types of
I mean, I think
issues.
I think I would probably be inclined to speak more broadly.
Broadly, sure.
Just because I think in general, our relationships with our family of origin show up in ways in which we
It's hard to name.
find
sometimes, too.
ourselves in patterns, seeking implicitly an attempt to repair. It can also cause us to project or assume that other people are going to be, this is implicit usually on an unconscious level, are going to be like that parent
That's
in
right.
our lives, the good and the bad of that. I mean, you have some people who, and then there's some people who really don't know the difference between, they only know woman as mother. They only know woman as
right,
mother.
right.
And so their idea of women, even in dating, is somebody who is going to take care of them in a certain way.
Like their mom.
Like their or like their mom
Or
didn't,
not.
or like their mom did not.
Exactly. Or neglect or whatever.
Yeah,
their
or whatever,
experience was.
whatever it was, right? And so, this is somebody could listen to this and we could raise the same critique and observation
other
as it relates in the other direction
For sure.
as well.
We're just, yeah.
And I just think that we have to do our own individual work. We have to be very serious about that before handing it off to other people. Now, when we are harmed in relationship, it is usually that we're repaired in relationship, not typically the same relationship, and maybe not even the same generation, right? So you can have think about a grandparent who was someone who's now a grandparent who was harmed as a child, and it is in the relationship with their grandchild in this in this moment that they find a sense of healing, right? And so there is a way in which we can kind of have this cross-generational healing that can take place. But usually what has to happen is that the relationship the performance of relationship has to kind of open itself up again, so
Mm-hmm.
that we have an opportunity to notice, to see, and to repair what went awry in a
Yeah.
new way now.
Yeah.
Now, all of that I just described would require us having the emotional maturity
Self
to be ready
awareness.
to
Yeah.
do that.
Yes.
We have to have an imagination of who we are apart from our pain, our trauma, our experience. We have to be able to name it for that. A lot of people have had experiences that they don't even call traumatic.
Trauma. Mm-hmm.
They don't realize that the way in which it imprinted a
Yes.
type of hurt, or a way of seeing themselves and seeing others that has had significant
Mm-hmm.
consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So we sometimes we see each other at different stages in our journey, and then we kind of get frustrated and angry. But the person has not gotten to a place yet to have the insight to know, like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what's happening. I'm repeating this, or I'm projecting this onto this individual, and now I'm going to do something different. I'll say this short story because I think it's relevant. We
Mm-hmm.
were a good friend of mine. We're around the same age. We've both been married to our spouses for a couple decades, and so we were a young woman who is much younger than us. I would probably put her somewhere in her 20s. Was joking about how she just how these single streets are bad, which amen, and how
And are. And are.
and are, and how how she's looking for a certain type of
Yeah.
man, certain type of husband, candidate, and she jokingly began to talk about my husband and my friend's husband, kind of like, well, look at such and such, they're really nice, and these look like men who would go to counseling, and they're respectful or whatever. And my good friend and I, who were peers, we started to laugh. We were like, this is not how these
This is
people
not
were
how
when
they
we met them. This is not who they were in
And
their
that's why she said that they were terrible when
yeah.
you started.
I'm like, this is not who these people were in their mid-20s. We're talking about people that are in their mid-40s now. And I'm not saying that just because you're older that you're wiser
Y'all have grown
necessarily.
together too.
Yes. And I think there's a sense in which relationally we are thinking about what is it that we can grow together in.
That's right.
Instead of this expectation of a finished product.
That's right.
Now.
That's right.
None of us are finished products. None of us are finished products. And so we have to think about what, giving people enough space
Grace
to grow. And this expectation, I mean, I'm pro therapy. I'm a psychologist. Yay. But even when I talk to women who are single sometimes and they're like, yeah, I need a man who goes to therapy. I think to myself,
Well,
that's going to be a limited pool. Now, with that being said, it's a good thing. And I want people who need to go to go to therapy. But if that becomes if that's
your
on
standards.
the checklist, it's almost like, I want someone who's 6'2". Well, most men on the planet aren't 6'2". So your list again, now we're
now we're getting into the
now it's getting impossible in the street. So 6'2" and goes to therapy. My God, who is this? Who is
and black. This is a lot.
There's
We're
4 of them. There are 4.
But it is about growing together.
It's about growing
that has
together.
to be one of the criteria, is having the grace to grow together. I mean, that's something I'm always looking
and
for.
knowing that we
can
need
we grow
to
together? Can we grow
Yes.
together? Can we learn from one another?
Knowing that we need to grow.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to give one of these random, the 7 points of dating advice to Black women, I would say, you want to find someone who has enough humility to know that they need to grow, and that you're not responsible, the woman,
growth.
at the end of the day, you're not responsible for their healing.
You're not Holy Ghost Jr. And you are not.
And vice versa.
That's right.
They're
Yeah,
not
exactly.
responsible for your healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, they are responsible not to hurt you and cause you more harm.
Do you
But
want
they
to
are
do well?
not responsible for your healing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That is really great. So then why don't we talk about some, I mean, some of y'all might be mad at us, but I think that was some good stuff right there, y'all.
Well,
so let's talk about what can people practically do to begin to unlearn this toxicity, unlearn this misogyny, do the inner healing work that needs to be done with God and with a therapist when you have the means. There's some things that you can do before you even go to therapy.
Yeah.
One thing that has been really helpful for me on my healing journey is journaling. I have journals.
Yes.
Journals and I journal.
Yeah.
I've been journaling since I came to faith many moons ago. At this point, so I have journals and journals, and that's just something that I have found, to be helpful So they're really prayers to God, but I'm also just talking about like, Lord, what's going on? Why is it so ghetto right now?
I know.
Why? What's going on with
10 whole journeys of why, oh Lord, why?
Exactly. So journaling is huge,
Yeah.
for me. Any other, what do you
Well,
have?
and I
Some
would say
practical
for
advice?
folks who aren't writers, you can also do an auditory
Okay.
journal, right? You could just
Whip
record
out
your
your phone.
voice. Yeah, working,
Hmm.
sharing your thoughts and your feelings. Mindfulness and meditation is definitely free.
Okay. Now, what does that look like? Just so that
Yeah.
people can have a mindfulness meditation.
I
What does
mean,
that look like? What does
people
that
who
mean?
are mindfulness practitioners, I mean, we typically describe it as being attentive to the present moment in a non-judgmental way. And there are so many things that we do through the course of the day that we are flooded with so many other things at the same time, like even brushing our teeth. You could take a few minutes to mindfully brush your teeth. And what that would mean is that you only thought about brushing
Brushing your
your
teeth.
teeth as you
Okay.
brush them. Now, people are like, huh? Like, yes, it's very rare that we actually do that.
That's true.
I'm
I'm
either
thinking about
zoned
so many
out, I'm
things.
thinking about so many other things, but what it would mean to actually really attend to what is happening in that moment. And I think of it as a way of giving my brain a bit of a gift because I'm such a busy person. So to just actually be able to go for a walk and just notice what it sounds like when the wind is ruffling the leaves
Mm-hmm.
is is a way in which my brain gets a bit of healing in that
Mm-hmm.
moment from its
Mm-hmm.
busyness.
Okay.
And I would say that's pretty significant with the Eastern practices. That's pretty consistent with the Eastern practices of Christianity. That's not like
Hmm.
that's not unusual. That's not a
Yes.
remix of the faith. We are told to be still and to know that God is
Yes.
God.
Yes.
We are told to meditate on the word. So another thing that a person can do is they could literally meditate on scripture. Now we think about we're studying scripture, we're reading scripture, but I would invite people to
Meditate.
actually
Mm-hmm.
meditate on scripture,
Mm-hmm.
to play the words over and over again, to take deep breaths in between each of those. And this is also a way to have a kind of trauma-informed way of
Maybe even
moving through
record
scripture.
yourself reading it
Sure,
and then playing it back, right?
sure, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or listen to Get in the Word with
You
Truth Table.
could. That's another
And we can pray
podcast.
over you. At the end of the prayer, after the end of every episode is a prayer. And a
Stat. Do all those
sermonette. I mean,
things.
sometimes it's
Do
sometimes
all
it's a
of those
sermonette.
things. Yeah.
What is there? I'm trying to think if there's anything. Prayer.
Yeah.
Prayer is huge too.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, now prayer ain't gonna heal all your trauma. It might. God can do it, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying. Prayer and therapy. These things are not opposed. To
Sure.
one another.
Yes. Get what you need.
Yeah, and
Get
maybe
what you
I
need.
would say maybe having um some good people around you that
Mm-hmm.
respect you, but that don't fear you. In that
Yeah.
they can tell you the truth.
My
They can
goodness.
hold up a mirror, and tell you you're tripping,
Yeah.
or no,
Or
that was wrong.
that sounds
You're
like
not.
pain speaking
Oh
instead
yes,
of your
or
purpose
fear.
speaking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Christina's good for that one. So tell me, know the difference between your fear voice and your faith voice. And I'm like, okay, I never, blah 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 blah.
I shall
Okay,
never.
is that your faith voice or your fear voice? I don't know. I ain't trying to think about that right now.
That's not what you usually say. You usually play along. You're like, okay.
Then I go, "Yeah." I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Because I have to deal with my own like very real anxiety.
Yes.
I have to like do that. I have to do that all the time with myself. Like filter, like okay, was that what was in that? Like what is that all about?
Yes.
I'm feeling some kind of way. Why am I
Yeah.
feeling this way right now? So
Yeah.
looking
And I think
within is scary stuff.
looking within, and even when we're praying, asking God to give us wisdom, to
Hmm.
give us insight,
Hmm.
give us the discernment, the ability to see ourselves,
Yeah.
so that we can grow in self-awareness. So
Yeah.
I can identify a little bit more, a lot more,
Yeah.
about when I'm like, my anxiety is like taking over. When I
Hmm.
start talking about never, ever, like,
Yeah.
I can't, everything
Yeah.
is black and white. Like there's always options, but that's trauma speaking. When everything is black and white, and it's like it's got to be this way, or it can't be done.
Yeah.
Like that, because I can live into that.
Yeah.
I can live into that.
Well, I know we're about to wrap, but I was sitting here thinking about just our topic in general, right? This the podcaster's gone
Yes.
wild, right?
Yeah.
And and we have a number of men who listen to Truth Table who have told us that who have maybe even not repented in some ways indirectly
Yes. Yeah.
about the ways in which they were socialized not to listen to women very well, not to
Or
honor
to
their
listen to
voices,
them at all.
listen to them at all,
Mhm.
and to learn from them and to sit with them in the ways that just even listening to the podcast has helped them to better
Yes.
listen to the women in their lives and not see them as their purpose being your purpose is something tied to my purpose
Just to
alone,
serve it. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I came across a post recently. I don't know how long it's been out there. I wish I knew the gentleman's name. He's a young, I'm saying young because he's definitely younger than me, young black guy theologian type. And he has a post where he talks about what it means that so many men do not like women. Now, by that, I don't mean in the
Mm.
sexuality standpoint. I
Yeah,
mean
just yeah.
like them as people.
Yeah.
And he started to talk about, I like my wife, and I don't just like her because of stuff that she can do for me. Like I like her laugh. I like what she jokes about. I like to see her kind of handle business. I like, and just all the things about her very personality and being that he enjoys. And I would want to challenge, particularly our
That's
male
good. Yeah.
listeners and the male podcasters who are really kind of getting paid or getting their identity from these misandrous podcasts, this anti-Black women
Or
podcast.
misogyny. Yeah,
It's
misogynistic.
misogynistic, yes, exactly. I would want them to reckon with to what extent they actually like
Like
women as
women.
people.
Write it
Do
down.
they
What
like
do you
Black women
like?
as
Do
people?
you like Black women? Do you
Yeah.
like women?
There's a huge
You
difference
gotta ask
between
yourself that.
liking someone's humanity and just enjoying them sexually or just
Objectifying
wanting to
them.
use them
Yeah.
as a mule.
Object.
But are there women who you like as people? And
As
to me,
whole beings.
that's a necessary element of maturity for men. And I mean, I think about being in early elementary school and, people are like, a boy would be like, oh, girls have cooties, right? So there's a very real socialization process for men to not like women.
That's true.
That there's something wrong with men who like women as people.
Mhm.
And the consequences of that are so devastating. It is all over. And this is not just uniquely Black men. This is men across the board in our culture. But there is so much freedom in learning to like and to enjoy
That's right.
half of the human population,
It's kinda helpful.
It's an important thing. So
kinda
I just wanted to kind of end
That's good, yeah.
on that note that
That's
and,
great.
and that's the case. I would prompt our sisters to do the same too.
Oh yeah.
As we do this series, are we able to agree with God about God's good design of
Yes.
creating creating men
Yes.
and liking them and them not having to be women in order not them having to be us
Be us, yeah. And
in
us
order
be
to-
them. Yeah.
in order to enjoy them.
Exactly. Well, we want to thank y'all for taking a seat at the table with us this week. Let's keep the conversation going. Black brother, we love you.
We do.
But these podcasts gotta stop.
Come on.
Tweet us your thoughts, share it on Facebook, Instagram, or you can email us because we know y'all got thoughts. You can email us at asktruthstable@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes and subscribe on your favorite podcast player. We are the executive producers and hosts, Ekemini and Christina. We'll see you soon on the next Truth Table. Bye, y'all.